Those of you who've lived at least some years back probably remember Postal 2, with tacky advertising that promoted and coaxed the sort of mild controversy that can get you banned in Australia, and possibly New Zealand, and enough edge to attract the die-hard support for those in the gaming and arts communities to talk about games instead of actually playing them. It was a pretty mediocre first-person shooter that did everything Grand Theft Auto tries to do, only worse, however. That in and of itself is hardly a crime, and hardly memorable. And the less said about Postal 3, or the movie for that matter, ooh, god that movie, the better. So why are we talking about it? Most people seem to blissfully recall that the games as having stemmed, fully formed, from Postal 2, much like Troll 2, no Postal 1 ever existed. But before it was a design to sell manufactured rebellion and peddle dubious hot topic merchandise. There was in fact a Postal precursor, and in my interest I've run into a few people who've actually played it, and fewer still who remember anything about it, positive or negative. But I played Postal. Unlike every other Postal game out there, the first is an isometric shooter. Similar to Duke's rocky start as a Boy Scout of a 2D platform shooter hybrid, this is typical of games produced in the early to late 90s. I'm reminded of a similarly bizarre point-and-adventure called Dreamweb. Both attempted to blur the line between what a game is and what the audience expects a game to be, but perhaps I should start with a disclaimer. Postal the First is not a good game. More so than the third, or even the second, it is a very bad game. Everything is simple and repetitive, even on the highest difficulty, cleverly labeled masochistic. You have infinite ammunition for your primary weapon and the enemy AI is questionable. Coupled with your character, the eponymous Postal dude, having infinite lives in every level becomes a slogfest that you know you can win as long as you play optimally. Find new ground, entrench, kill anyone who comes close, repeat. New weapons allow for broader tactical choice, but there is nothing like the thrill of games such as Doom or Quake, or my personal favorite, Hexen, and no hint of a tactical strategy in a game such as XCOM or Syndicate. The closest analog I can think of, it's clear from the developer running with scissors, wasn't sure what genre to aim for and incorporated all the cool stuff from each one they liked in the hope that it would sell. Similarly, the game had hints of what would become the self-mockery of the later games. The Postal dude will occasionally quip in with a topical taunt such as toasty when the enemy is on fire, Postal when scoring a critical hit, or OJ at random intervals. Not smooth like OJ, or I got away with it like OJ could have if he did it, just OJ. Assuming the audience would just make the assumption and roll with it, I guess. But the lines are delivered haltingly. Bad voice acting and lines warning us that we gon' get you are combined with shrieks that our bullets have struck a leg or an eye. The opening screen is a screaming mouth overlaid across a blurry figure standing in a field of skulls. I chose to upload one of the tamer images from one of the level cut-ins to give you an idea of the disjointed art style. The level cut-ins are what drew me to the game. See, when I first played it, or rather watched it over the shoulder of another, they seemed strangely beautiful, as did the lovingly rendered backgrounds. Though I never lived in Arizona, they felt like they could be any small town in most places, and each cut-in came with a bit of raving text. Some were poorly written and cliché, others, well, this is what they had to say. The earth is hungry, its heart throbs, and demands cleansing. The earth is also thirsty. Feast upon the frozen images of molten massacre as the machineries of death grind relentlessly, mindlessly on. For all the attention the later games receive for being senseless and sensationalist, the first game genuinely delivers a feeling of uncomfortable dread and discomfort. At times there's no music in later stages, just ambient noise that could barely count, even as drone trance. Occasionally a particular sound will grow uncomfortably, drowning out the rest, then fade once more into the background. This combines with a moment of ridiculous cheese and lack of planning to feel somehow more uncomfortable. But mute the sound and just focus on the gameplay, and it's pretty subpar. Even for the time, the game is hardly more gory than something rated T, and it's only the presence of the surreal cut-ins that somewhat challenges that. It's ridiculous any attention or hype was created by the game at all, and yet that's precisely what happened. One that this time tried to prove its cred by pointing out that this time you never had to kill a single person. That was true in the first game as well, though. You never had to kill unarmed civilians, they just got in your way, and sometimes were excellent meat shields. One memorable stage has a full marching band that plays the Stars and Stripes Forever as it strolls by. Both you and your opponents gun through them and the attending civilians without any care for casualties. Cries of, "You can stop shooting, jerk, I'm already dead," mixed with the frantic sobbing of the wounded, fade, and then stop. I pressed Q to kill myself. The button is constantly there, should I have a bad start and want to try again. Not so much for the other souls, though. Why was so much effort put into this game, if it was designed purely to drive up fear and anger, and thus generate corresponding buzz? Why was there so many genuinely dark themes left in it? Like the ending, which was the protagonist, having killed everyone else alive, opened fire on an elementary school, only to find that none of his bullets do any harm, and collapse in a stunned, resigned stupor. My belief is that running with scissors was conflicted. They want to genuinely discuss the dehumanization and ritualization of violence in our culture, our authority, and every aspect of our lives. And they also wanted a quick buck. And what sort of interested fear they could create with a game like this? The latter turned out to be profitable. So any claim that advocates of the series are somewhat hypocritical. The games surely do profit off violence, mob mentality, and fear, even as they poke fun at those who wring their arms and flail at the mere mention of such things. More than anything else, Postal was a product of its time. Fears about the future, about job security, and increasing inability to rely on education or status to help your family, or even just to survive, were everywhere. The narrative of the game laid forth stage cut-ins as journal entries, dates of times or massacres. Though they served as a retrospective for Postal Dude's rampage, I feel they serve better to mark as a sign of the game's age. While Postal was a product of a then unknown and untested studio, however, we are now fed stories of such massacres daily by the same outlets that decry them. And those same outlets profit quite nicely from scaremongering and latest mass-produced killfests. Postal was never about decrying or promoting violence, making a point, or even a game. But in some ways, it foresaw or perhaps even shaped the future. One where creative sterility overcomes innovation, and where the sources that tell us most often to be cool and rebel are designed, tested, and marketed to us by the very same organizations we're told to rebel against. Any deeper look at what exactly disturbs us is replaced by talking testicles and firing guns through cats. The sort of safe rebellion that can be discussed over beers and laughing conversation. Muted, and yet uproarious. I'm fascinated by the stories between stories. The little things that developers and writers and artists say that say more than they mean to. As those who keep up with my writings have noticed, it's probably a theme of mine. Postal is, to me at least, the perfect example of this. Simultaneously far less offensive than it claimed to be, and yet the worst and most interesting parts hid in plain sight. There are several people in the credits for the game who had no later involvement with the franchise, one only wishing to be known as the Painkiller. Sick. What exactly they added, and why they made no contribution to the later and more successful games, will have to remain a mystery. Well, we haven't done one of these types of creepypastas in a while, and these are known as THEORYPASTAS. Now, for those of you who don't know what Postal 2 is, or the Postal games, are games made by Running with Scissors and are intended to be over-the-top games, throwing you in incredibly bizarre, politically incorrect, very politically incorrect scenarios where the player must progress through each day doing different tasks, each getting progressively more bizarre and, well, fucked up, for lack of a better term. The game is filled with over-the-top stereotypes, and it's no doubt some people consider this game quite edgy, and it was definitely a part of a lot of controversy, but is it edgy? Well, I'll leave that to you to decide. To me, it isn't that impressive of a game, but I got a laugh out of it here and there, and if I'm not expecting too much, sure, I'll play it. Now, this creepypasta throws the media's bias against video games into the mix, and to an extent I can agree with that, but I'm not going to get super political over here. There's two sides to the coin, as always, so I'll just leave it at that. Now, I've never played the first game, but in all fairness, it's really not worth playing, as it's not that great, but the creepypasta makes an interesting analysis. See, the original Postal game is a surreal game. On the surface, it's just some bare-bones isometric shooter in terms of gameplay, but the little quirks mentioned here and there add a lot to the eeriness when you really do think about it. Again, you have to put yourself into that position. You know, when you compare to the actual game as well, it makes you wonder the dark tone really is there to deliver a message or, you know, or a latent meaning. And especially when you compare to the second game and how different they were from all these quirks, the theory begins to make, you know, a bit of sense. Now, was the company conflicted as described here? Looking at the quirky differences between the first and second game, Yeah, I know there's a third game, okay? But I went through enough sessions of hypnotherapy to forget about it all, so we're not going there. For the second game in comparison, yeah, the first title was indeed edgier when you look at it in the eyes that this creepypasta, gives you. Hell, I'd even say it's an earlier build of hatred. God, that game. Now, it could just be coincidence, and I tend to aim that way. I don't think that Running with Scissors really thought the themes of Postal too much, especially when fucking Uwe Boll can be given the rights to shoot a movie based off of it. For the most part, these games are your average edgy simulator. They're fun if you're not expecting too much, and highly incorrect. Politically incorrect, that is. The story itself, though, I thought was interesting. The theory played itself nice, and it wasn't going to stretch out too far away. It looked at what Running with Scissors did, and while this does have a bit of truth to it, I'm going to lean towards the side where they really didn't, do anything, and most of it is just coincidence. But then again, the theory can go any way, right? To whoever's listening. So I'm going to ask you what you think about this theory in general. And what would you rate this theory pasta, and what would you change to make it better? Again, let me know what you think about this theory. It'd be important to me to hear what you think in the comments below. This has been another episode of Haunted Gaming, Theory Pastas as well. If you like what you saw, please like, comment, and subscribe. Dislike it if you dislike it. This is me, Mutahar, and I am out.